Okay, welcome to the community show. My name is Matanda Abubaker, and I'm going to be standing in for Toko Abunia, the host of this show. This week, as you may be aware, I had a very special day, the 15th of September, which is the International Day of Democracy. And so on Civic Space TV, conversations have been happening around democracy. But as is our practice, we always do not want the conversations to just keep hanging. And so we want to take them to the community level, asking the questions of what is democracy, what is the status of democracy, and how does our state of democracy affect the people in the communities. What we seek to do with this show is to avoid just being academic, but try to find out from the grassroots what these conversations and what these values like democracy really mean to the day-to-day lives of the people. On this show today, we are joined by people whom we believe are rooted in the community, and we are joined by Marion Kirabo, who is a human rights advocate or activist, if you like, and a well-famed former student leader and community leader and organizer. Marion, it's a pleasure to have you on the community show.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Yes, and besides Marion, we are also joined by Miss Annah. Ashana, an interesting name there. Is it Ashana or Ashaba? I hope I got it right.
All the three. Ashaba Annah Ashana is a combination of Ashaba Annah.
Ah, okay. So I was wondering, Ashana, that's the short form of Annah Ashaba. Miss Annah Ashaba is a human rights activist as well, and currently under the Women Protest Working Group. Ashaba is also a teacher by profession. Annah, it is a pleasure to have you on board today.
Thank you so much. I'm so honored to be part of this today, and I look forward to fruitful engagements.
Along the way, thank you, Ashaba. Along the way, we hope to be joined by Mr. Sam Evidence Orikunda, who is the Deputy RDC of Chenjojo. Not yet here, but we are hoping that he'll be able to join us such that we also get some perspectives from Chenjojo. But maybe to start with you, Ashaba, we have been having conversations around the whole topic of democracy. It's a very popular topic that one would say is well sold and is always on the lips of politicians and academics. But from a perspective of an ordinary person, what is democracy? What is this thing or this animal called the democracy?
Thank you so much. So democracy, most people in the community believe that it is the power of the people to influence decisions. But on the look of things, we always leave this power to politicians and leaders. We think that by just finishing elections and moving on with our lives, we've done our part, which isn't the case, because democracy is a process that needs to be continuous. Before, during, and after elections, there is still a lot of work that needs to be done on the ground in terms of civic education.
Okay, so you say you're making a case that democracy goes beyond just elections. And you have mentioned the civic education, but I'm more interested. So an election is an activity or a process, as you have preferred to call it. But besides the election, to an ordinary person, what more is there in democracy for an ordinary person? I thought they should go and vote, and then after that, go on with their other business. And some people have said, time for politicking is over. Go and work. Go open your shops, go to the gardens. What else can someone do in the community?
Holding your leaders accountable to make sure that services are provided and all the promises are fulfilled. For example, we always have issues of lack of medication or inadequate medication in hospitals. You have issues of roads. All those things cannot just be done during elections or what people promise. So there's also need to hold leaders accountable. So for the ordinary person, democracy is you vote this person and then you expect them to give you accountability. You expect them to make sure that services are brought closer to you. Of course, there is still a challenge there, but people always try to hold their leaders accountable, to ask questions, though sometimes these questions never reach to the people that are supposed to be, that are concerned. Yeah. Did I get that?
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ashaba. And maybe let me cross to Marion at this point. Marion, whereas you're a human rights activist, I know that you're also a politician. You served as a gender minister at Makerere and was a candidate for councillorship, which is a local government position. For all intents and purposes, a very grassroots and community position.
Yeah.
And I know that you're engaged in community organizing. You have heard from Ashaba, she has mentioned that whereas elections are part of democracy, there is also more to democracy than just elections. Would you maybe help us understand, given your various roles that you have played in the past and play now, on how democracy interacts with an ordinary person?
Well, I agree entirely with what Ashana has said, that democracy is more than just an election. Some of the core tenets of democracy include freedom of assembly, freedom of speech, consent, and the people being able to express themselves and also hold their leaders accountable. I'll take, for example, experiences from my community organizing. That let me use a small sample space of, let me say, Makerere. So we have an election, but sometimes your leaders do fall short of the mandate that you have given them to serve you. So what would happen in a proper democracy is that when the leaders fall short and the people are disgruntled over the decisions they had made, because they're only human, temptations come here and there, the people are able to express their discontent. How do they express their discontent? Starting with the freedom of expression, freedom of speech, they go on to, let me say, they write petitions, they go into the media and criticize and condemn whatever actions they think are not proper. If that fails, then they go into the protests, which have now become a taboo in Uganda, I would say. They go into, assembly, the freedom of assembly, organizing themselves and calling for the government or their leaders to take appropriate measures to make sure that they correct these wrong actions. However, as time has gone on, that space has really shrunk. The ability of the common man to actively engage with the democracy of this country has that ability keeps on shrinking. Due to the different regulations. I'll tell you that even some of the laws that perhaps the government puts in place to kind of shrink the freedom of assembly and expression do manifest even in a small community as Makerere, that academic freedoms, the ability for people to gather around and interact with some of the problems with their democracy and governance. It has become frustrated in such a way that when you gather now, they use the excuse of COVID, and they will not allow conversations to happen that they think are very problematic and critical of the state. I think a case in point was recently a process which also civic space was involved in, whereby we had us and we are citizens of this country, students, had called prominent female women leaders in this country to kind of interrogate with some of the things that affect women in democracy. Why is it that you are in leadership, but we're not seeing the trickle-down effects of your leadership? That is how the citizen participates in this democracy, that you might not all occupy this space of positions of leadership, but I am doing my part as a common citizen by asking you questions. I voted you into power. I expect an answer. So when we sit down and we say that this is the problem, that you have failed in this area, so how can maybe we, the citizens, work with you to solve this certain problem? You get. But unfortunately, what is happening is that even those gatherings are not allowed. So the citizen is knocked out slowly in this way out of the democratic process. And now, if the people are not involved in the democratic process, is it still a democracy? Perhaps those are things we should ask ourselves. If people are not allowed to gather. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. If I can just engage with some of the views that have come through, you have made two critical assertions. One, that the space for democracy seems to be shrinking, and I assume you're talking about the Ugandan space.
Yeah.
And two, you have given examples of some of those spaces, including that meeting that was supposed to be convened at Makerere. And so I have two questions for you from that. The first one, when you say shrinking, it means there was a point when this space was big.
Yeah.
But if evidence was here speaking for the government, I suspect he would have told you that actually, historically, the space has never been bigger in Uganda than it is with the current regime. That previously there was no constitution that had a Bill of Rights that guaranteed those rights, that previously if people spoke, they would be killed or kidnapped, that previously at some point there was no parliament and there were no local councils. What do you say to that? So when you say the space is shrinking, at what point was it better? And then secondly, as you answer that, also look at the next question of saying when you have meeting and there are regulations, are you suggesting that within a democracy, freedoms and rights are absolute? Because again, evidence, if he was here, he would have told you that, whereas you have the freedoms and rights, you also have to follow the law. What do you say to these two questions?
I will start with the second, then I'll follow up with the first. Well,
Yes.
If you're putting in place rules and regulations, it's important that they're not used discriminatory, that you do not create a double standard for certain people, and for other people, you just look the other way. First of all, for these engagements and these meetings, we have been having weddings of very prominent people, and you have seen them gather so many hundreds of people at their function, and the police just looks away. We have had funerals of prominent people, and the police just looks away. These meetings and engagements that we usually have, actually, for example, the last meeting that I was talking about, permission was given by actually the Ministry of Health. And their requirement was just keep the SOPs. They gave us a number of people that should only appear physically, while the other people appear online. So now, us who had actually followed the rules were bombarded and stormed, who had actually gotten permission, while they're allowing these other activities to take place when they are completely breaking the rules that they put in place in the first place. We have seen that some of these people are members of parliament. These people are members of government. So you cannot say that I have created a rule that only you people can follow, that for me, I am above the law. That's not how a democracy works. Secondly, yes, Uganda has had a very violent, very militaristic, very authoritarian, a very troubled governance since we got independence from the British. However, I would not say that I wouldn't say that it's proper to say that there's no time in our history that we have not had a semblance of democracy. When this regime did come into power, for the first time, we had a representative constitution, a very good constitution. It was even ranked among the best on this continent at one time before it was constantly amended. That in the first 10 years of Museveni's regime, people can testify to the fact that there was at least a deliberate effort to try and create a semblance of democracy and good governance, irrespective of, let me say, that it was not perfect. That I would say even in the community of Makere, when I came in, that we could gather, we could assemble, and there was a semblance of our voices being heard. Even if it came to the state, there was a window, no matter how small it was, from which we could negotiate. But now, as the longer the regime stays in power, the more even that wiggling, those spaces where you could wiggle your way into, are slowly becoming thinner and thinner. So I
Yes.
would not say that completely we have had it all bad. There was a time when we could sit, whether you're opposition, whether you're whether you're anti-government, that you could go on radio and not have the fear that you will be arrested, or at least for us students. I'm talking from the community space of me as a student. But slowly by slowly, that is becoming impossible. So I think it also comes to the grip on power. Perhaps the current regime is saying that it's slowly losing the faith of the people, and therefore it must suffocate every form of dissent, because it fears that if the people are able to organize and collect themselves, perhaps that will be the end of the regime.
Thank you, Marion. And you end on an interesting note for Sam Orikunda, who has joined us. Mr. Aradisi, you're welcome. Kindly unmute. Sam, please unmute. We can't hear you. Unmute your mic.
Thank you so much, moderator and the panelists. Good morning.
Good morning. I did not notice when you slid in. I don't know whether you had Marion's conclusion. I would like us to dive into the discussion. Sam Orikunda, like I said earlier, is the Deputy RDC of Chenjojo. And Sam, did you hear a part of Marion's remarks?
Yes, I heard what Marion was saying.
Okay, wonderful. So let me just phrase some sort of question for you. So far we have had what democracy is and the tenets. Ashaba and Marion have tried to share with us what democracy is, and they've also done some assessment of the current state of affairs. And from their assessment, which you have partly had, we don't seem to be doing very well. So maybe you can also give us a perspective on what you think democracy is and where you think we are as a country. Yes, Sam.
Thank you so much. Good morning, participants. My name is Sam Orikunda, the Deputy RDC for Chenjojo District. I am very glad to join you. I think some of the complaints which I've had people giving are true. Not all of them, because you all understand that we got independence not a long time ago, and our democracy is very young. But we have, to some extent, did well, even better than the countries whose democracy is a bit old. Like, for instance, like US, which is an example of us all. You understand that They have had issues in elections. You've had up to now, the former president of America, Donald Trump, doesn't agree that he lost the election. He says he was rigged. Then secondly, I don't agree with people with a lot of complaints. You are saying the government fears the people. When the people gather, the president is afraid, the government is afraid. But you are aware that we have had elections several times and people accused. And in any case, I don't know why you people usually focus on the position of the president, yet even on the, if at all, these other parties which you say that we try to limit, we try to coerce, if surely they had the support of the people, then now comes even the representatives, these people who contest on those political parties don't pass through. You know how difficult it is for them when it comes to running, when it comes to campaigning and gathering support for them to win. You understand that they, not because everyone is told not to campaign or is forced to not to go anywhere, but those people go in the people. And in any case, by the way, you will even be shocked to understand that some of those opposition leaders, they try even to bribe more than the NRM candidates. You will be shocked to find out that those people, they get some monies, and sometimes when an opposition leader has the money, you find them being able to rig and even and forcing their way to the leadership, which is really unfortunate. Because if you say that you want to have the transparency, the democracy, all the things they usually say, then you have to follow them. You have to go to the right and say, I have presented myself. I don't have any money, but for me, what I've come for is for the good leadership. And you don't do like what you are accusing the people in the government. Then I also had someone talking about the radio. I don't think that there is any government that allows freedom of expression, that like the government which is in power. People go on radio to insult the president. You find someone is politicking from Monday to Sunday and bringing out issues which they would even ask them, can you defend this point? And he has no way how they can defend. But they can freely go on radio, say everything they want to say. Like, for instance, you can listen to them and like their government programs which are coming. But someone goes on radio and says, this government, this project is not going to help you in anything. Yet the program has just started. Yet even the people who are supposed to work in it are not yet recruited. But someone is already on the radio to tell the people that this program is going to abort. It is not going to help you in anything. And they freely express themselves. And in so doing, they have somehow succeeded, because some people in the government these days even fear going on radio, going on TV, and they say they try to defend, because the other ones try to out-compete them, and out-competing them through lies, through insulting, through all that things that they try to do on the media. But good enough, Ugandans surely understand when you go on radio and you're telling lies, Ugandans will know that you're telling lies. When you go on radio to tell the truth, they know that what you've said is truth, because they have seen all these things happen. They have seen people speak, and after speaking, they will go to the box to make a decision. So I think, however much we need, just a minute, however much we need democracy, and however much we need transparency, and let us not be hypocritical. If we say we are demanding for things to go in there, and you understand, moderator, let's take an example of this, the opposition party, the FDC. They have been the biggest opposition party. You understand what happened in the presidential elections between Mugisha Muntu and Patrick Oboy that led Mugisha Muntu to say, no, these things are going in the wrong way, and I should find some other way where I should struggle for my future. Some of the reasons he was giving were justifiable. Those things were happening, and they were so sharp. So there are some people who try to smoothen their linen in public, but when what they are doing is more worse and more data than what happens in the government. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sam. You have given a very lethal response, and I'm sure Marion and Ashaba must be itching, but I'm going to start with you, Ashaba. Contrary to what had been suggested earlier, Sam seems to be telling us that there's actually too much democracy, and that those of you who are advocating and pushing for more, in any case, do not have clean hands or the credibility to talk about the same. What do you say to this, Anna?
Thank you so much. I believe that Sam himself doesn't believe in what he's saying, because first of all, he agreed that the democracy we have right now is problematic. He agreed to some extent. And then he ended by saying that by accusing opposition politicians for playing more dirty than the government, which means that the government he serves does dirty things. He agrees that democracy is limping. So back to the question. He drilled, Mr. Sam, you drilled, but we are looking at democracy and the muntu wa wansi. So leaving alone the politicians and all the politicking, how is everything that we do as leaders affecting people at the community level? He talked of rigging of elections and bribery by opposition, which is laughable, but yeah, there is high monetization of politics right now. So everyone getting into an election, contesting for a position, you need to have a lot of money, because there's been high monetization of politics, and it is affecting people at the grassroots level. How? People do not no longer choose according to ideas or your manifesto. If you buy them a box of matchsticks, that is a matchbox, they'll vote you. Buy them salt, they'll vote you. And what is causing that? The government. The government resources have been, they are poorly allocated. The corruption, the misallocation and misappropriation of funds. So you find people are just depending on hand to mouth. And the only people they look up to are the leaders. During elections, I would like to quote someone who said, that is Selmaga Kalunda, he said that elections these days are not fruitful. It's not a fair process. It's just keeping people busy. Then at the end of it, or you go back to normal. So the RDC also said that opposition politicians insult government officials, they threaten, they use inappropriate language. When even the fountain of Honor always accuses pigs, every time he comes to condemn something that he knows has been happening and he could possibly stop it, it's pigs and idiots. That's the fountain of honor. So generally, democracy and the people at the community level, there is a lot that needs to be done. And Mr. Sam, I would like to bring it to your attention that the freedom that we have we don't have freedom actually. It's always suppressed. Look at the civil society and independent media. They suffer a lot of legal and extralegal harassment from the state. Police brutality has been the song of the day, and police always comes out and says, we are doing investigations, we are doing this, we are doing that. So the state has managed to instill fear among the population, in that even when someone has a burning issue or concern, they usually fear to say it out because they fear being arrested, being taken in a drone, being kidnapped, and all sorts of things. Back to you, Abubakar. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much. And I now want to take it to Marion to also pick her perspective. Marion, you've had Sam, who is saying that, first of all, whereas our democracy may not be perfect, it is still young, but is doing fairly well. In some cases, it says better than even older democracies. I know that you are also a politician, and an opposition politician at that, and it says as opposition politicians, you are actually, if they are dirty, then you are dirtier. You have no moral authority to accuse them, and you are only spoiling and swaying public opinion in your favor to shun even government programs that would otherwise benefit the people. So, Marion, how do you respond to this?
I'll start from the issue of, he talked about elections, and I'll try to connect it to how it affects our democracy. When we talk about elections, we always qualify what type of elections that we're talking about. It is not by mistake that when we're talking about elections, we talk about free and fair elections, that they must be free and they must be fair. Having elections every 5 years does not guarantee that you will actually have a democracy that is functioning. As someone who's participated in the last elections, I will tell you that there was nothing free or fair about them. That if we are talking about the common man and we are talking about his ability or his how comfortable and safe he feels to actually go to the polling station and make an independent decision on who he chooses to be his leader, that did not happen. That the common man in the last election was not free or did not make an independent decision. And some of them did not even show up to the polling station, especially when you go to rural areas. First, let us look at the people who are engaged actively in this politics. From the people who campaigned for different candidates that they supported, whether presidential or certain political parties, we saw that many of them were kidnapped. We saw them picking even the wananchi who were just looking and onlookers just because perhaps they saw someone put on a red t-shirt and perhaps someone was talking in a conversation that for a certain political party and they were not going to vote the person in power at the moment. We saw the way the military reacted to certain...
Some kindly mute your mic. Yes, Marion, you can go.
Yes, we saw the way the military was heavily involved in our politics, that they would follow some candidates around. Well, some candidates were allowed to go and freelance all over the country. Others were constantly, their campaigns were constantly manned by the military. Their people constantly harassed and blocked. We saw that we saw that after seeing, that perhaps the people would not vote them independently, some politicians in the ruling party went out of their way to give out bribes, to give out, of course, due to the pandemic, unfortunately, these elections, unlike other elections, were very commercialized because people were suffering, it was locked down economically. So most politicians used it as an avenue to give out food and all those things that were supposed to be done by government. But unfortunately, because government either did not have the capacity or was not really interested. And it's not to say that it did not give out food, but you had the reports of either the food being bad or some areas not getting this food and this food being sold on the black market, even if it was free government food, all those things. So because of the competence, I would say, and the inability of government to provide some of these services and to kind of cushion the people from the economic crisis that they were facing, we saw that the last year's elections became so commercialized. And so it was for a kilogram of sugar or posho, I want your vote for a kilogram of what? Of posho, which was very wrong. No one can make an independent decision. So what happens to the one who has actually, the leader who has the manifesto and has the good plans and has the capability versus this one who's just giving you a kilogram of posho, you know? So how is it, can we really call that an independent decision? Has this person who has gone to vote made an independent decision? If the person is being harassed and their relatives being kidnapped by the state and the military, can they make an independent decision? Can we call that a free and fair election? On the day of polling, on the day that the election is, the vote is cast, if there's an internet shutdown and people are prevented from accessing some of these polling stations, especially in rural areas, that's what happened. That there were reports of even the military voting in some places. You're not allowed to go to this polling station. But also, the people cannot access and cannot monitor these elections physically or have video or media evidence to show that these elections were actually free and fair, and the people at the polling stations were actually the voters and not the military. Like, we had no evidence to show that everything was going on smoothly because the internet had been shut down. That was the only way the wananchi could monitor the elections to see that actually everything was free and fair and went on. If the government had nothing to hide, why did it shut down the internet? So when we are looking at elections, how are these elections held? What is the accessibility to first of all, to this? What is the wananchi's accessibility to the polling station? What is the wananchi's accessibility to the candidates who are supposed to come and give them the manifesto so that the people vote on ideas? What is the capability of also the wananchi to make independent decision considering the poverty levels and the economic crisis that is going on in the country? You have to look at all those things to establish why, if we have actually a free and fair elections, just having an election every 5 years does not guarantee that you're having a functional democracy. On the part of opposition politicians being corrupt or bribing and all those, you see, we are a product of the system or the society around us. Unfortunately, we live in a country whereby every electoral year there have to be more and many more constituencies made every electoral year. You'll find that every electoral year there are new laws and regulations put in ground is not leveled, that it is in favor of one person against the other. Unfortunately, and this is not to excuse anyone, but it's just to understand the landscape on which we live, that unfortunately that sometimes because of the nastiness and let me say the imperfection, that certain opposition politicians have to feel that they have to play the game in order to get where they want to get, that the game is rigged. So if we are to play fair, we are going to be knocked out. So we also have to innovate new ways that may not be necessarily proper for us to get where we get. But that is not that is for some, that is not true for everyone. And it's part of the problem that the state has created. It is just a symptom of a crooked system. But then even when he talked about the fact that people can go and abuse the president on media and everything. That is not also true, because we have seen what has happened to the likes of Dr. Stella Nyanzi. We have seen how she was tortured, how she was jailed. I forget the name of the blogger the blogger from Turkey who recently was hunted down and is in custody right now because he said some things that the government did not agree with. So things are not going properly. It's not just enough to just see it on the surface. You have to look deeper into these elections. You have to look deeper into who is being targeted. You can't just say that people can speak however they are, but you have seen that people are speaking and they are being kidnapped in the night and we don't know where they are. Someone just disappears and you don't know where they are. So I completely disagree with what he's saying. The opposition has, yes, its own faults, but they are working in an imperfect system. And therefore, sometimes they might not always get it right, but they keep on trying. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Marion. And that will send me back to you, Sam. So, Sam, well, the summation of what Marion and Ashaba is happening, the tempo has been set by the system that you represent, and that we can do better. The situation is not as beautiful as you had painted it earlier. I'm sure you have been taking notes of their comments, and maybe before I ask another specific question, you could engage with them.
Thank you so much, Abubakar. Let me start with someone called Annah. Yeah, she says that that I said our democracy our democracy is young, and that means that I accept the fact that we do not have any democracy in Uganda. No, I said that our democracy is young, but in one way or the other, we have performed better than the democracies which we take as examples. I gave you an example of the election that America just held, and up to now, the former president has never accepted that he lost the election. He still says that the results were tampered with. So that's what yes?
Yeah. So if I can just engage, would you really argue that Uganda's democracy is better than the democracy of the United States, especially if we tie that in with what Marion is saying, that, democracy is not just about casting the vote. It's also about campaigning. It's also about harassment and imprisonment. It's also about adjudication systems. So whereas Trump may be arguing that he did not lose the election, would you argue that the environment within which the American election was held was worse than our environment here?
Bakar, thank you. I wouldn't say that our democracy is better, but again, I want to tell you that democracy, the biggest part of democracy is about choosing leaders, people freely being able to choose who they want to choose. And the moment you fail on that, and maybe you have freedom, you have all that, I don't think it would weigh much than having a free and fair election, because even the definition of election is about how people choose their leaders and freely doing so. So I cannot say that our democracy is better than that one of the US, because first of all, our democracy is more younger than that of US. The one of US is in about 400 years or two, but for us, we are in 50s. So, but I'm trying to tell you that in one way or the other, sometimes we have performed better than them, or sometimes the mistakes that happen here are similar to those of US, where the democracy is very old. Even those who demand for the people who have been telling us about democracy, and those who even sponsor the activities that we do most of the times that are related to the democracy, most of those monies come from the countries whose democracies are old. But it also shocks you to find that most of the times they have issues similar to the ones that we have. Then let me now go to Marion. Marion brought out something which was very interesting when I told you about the people being free to abuse the president on radio and media, and she was like that Stella Nyanzi said something and she was arrested. Then she almost brought another one who's she also wanted to tell us about someone else who was arrested on the similar case. I don't know, Marion maybe would want to see people freely abusing an individual, harassing an individual, and they go freely like that. I don't know why you people would want such a, because even if it was you as an individual and someone goes personal on you, on the internet, on the radio, and nothing happens to them, surely it would be unfair, and it shouldn't be happening. Because someone like Stella Nyanzi, who went personal on the president's wife, and these other people who want to make terrible images of the president and put them on the internet, and sure you would want people to go free after insulting someone like that? I don't know. If that's the democracy, then I think we are wrong in one way or the other, because at the end we will have the law, and the law will be protected, because the law should protect every individual. If I am doing something, you shouldn't come and insult me and harass me on media. I also have the part of the freedom. I also need to be protected. So that one is very unfortunate. Then Abubakar, in the topic that you gave us, you told us something to do with how the democracy affects the people.
Sam, fast hold it a bit. I see Ashaba, I see your hand is up. Do you have something specific to bring Sam's attention? Please do that.
Yes, I would like to say something. So, Mr. RDC, I don't think I'm weighing in as a teacher, and specifically as a teacher of language, that is English literature and English language studies. I don't think that Stella Nyanzi abused the president. If you're to weigh in on language and literature, that was just poetry. If you're to analyze the writings and say president, she exercised her right as a writer and expressed herself, and was arrested and persecuted for that, and she actually won the case against the government, that case of cyber harassment and whatever charges she was slapped with. And yesterday she penned down another beautiful poem for the president. I hope you've checked it out. It's just literature, use of language. I don't find it abusive. I find it artistic. Yeah. That's what I'm going to say.
Can I
okay,
move on,
so
please?
yeah, you can move.
Hello?
Yes, Marion.
I just clarity, sorry for interrupting him, just maybe clarity that actually I think for his own information that yes, insulting a public figure is part of democracy. It's part of the freedom of speech and expression. That because you are a public figure and you have put yourself out there, you have put your life out there, you have, if the president does not want to be insulted, he should resign from his position and become a common citizen. He has the right to privacy because he would then have the right to privacy because he's a common citizen. But because he's a public figure, he's operating in a public office, he must follow the rules of what is acceptable in a free and democratic society. And what is acceptable is the fact that your leaders, yes, they can be insulted, they can be criticized, and they have to be held accountable. Why? Because they're public figures in a public office, and most of the decisions they make do affect the public. So yes, the public has a right to criticize them, and in some cases even insult them. So
okay.
we should
Yes, thank you, Marion.
Yes. It helps the people.
Thank you, Abubakar.
Yes, and as you respond to that, Sam, I also want you to comment on what Marion said earlier. I don't know if that was Marion or Ashaba, where the president usually uses words like pigs, like idiots. You know, are those also insults? And if so, are they acceptable? Yes, Sam.
Thank you so much. Let me start with Ashaba. Maybe Ashaba forgets the fact that I am also a teacher of literature and English. And she brought up something to do with the poetic language of Dr. Stella Nyanzi. Ashaba, when we were studying, we were taught that some symbols and images that we use in the literature and the language are abusive and dangerous, are not supposed to be used on an individual, supposed to be used in public, because they bring out they could bring out something that is terrible. For instance, there are some people really who we hold with high esteem and whom you should not use some certain of symbols and that kind of language. And by the way, Ashaba, in that same thing, it is the same language that tells us about being polite, the polite language. If it is true that you are a teacher of English, you could have been taught about politeness, which language you should, communication, how to communicate with who and how. So in languages, we're also taught how to be polite, and we are taught how that would help you to get what you need. So I can answer you like that. Then there is Marion says that insulting a public figure is part of their freedom. I don't agree with you, Marion. Maybe if you said that constructive criticism should be part of your freedom, then I would agree with you. But you cannot tell me that because someone is the president, then he's supposed to be insulted. Because you understand that even the president himself has rights as an individual, and the Constitution describes him. The Constitution really tells us how we should address him, how we should communicate to him, and all that. So if you tell me that because someone is a president, you have a right to insult him, and when you insult him, nothing should happen to you because it is part of your freedom, I think you're wrong. By the way, you also now bring me to the issue that some people in opposition, or some people who really want to be in opposition, don't know what exactly to do in that kind of thing. Some people, I think, should be trained on how to oppose, because it shouldn't be a war. Because when you insult me as an individual, I won't feel good, and I won't talk to you easily. And this is where how things have failed in one way, because we say we are supposed to mediate, we are supposed to talk, and then when we talk, we get solution of the issues that are affecting our people. But now if you say that you are going to insult me on radio from Monday to Sunday, then how shall we talk? How shall we manage the society? How shall we develop the country? But you're supposed to go on the floor of parliament and say, these things are not moving on well, but we can do this and this. And that's why I like this other statement in Uganda of saying, like they somehow how they describe opposition as Oruwabula government, the people who advise the government. They do not say the opposition, but they say the people who advise the government. And you cannot advise the government when you are abusing the head of the government. No way. I think that was not correct. Then, Abubakar, you allow me to touch on the part of the question that I did not touch, and that is how the democracy affects the people, our people in the community. There are some instances where you find someone runs for a position and he just buys his way there, giving people money and all that. And then when you do that, it leads to now electing people who are not supposed to be in those positions. And that's how people lose out service and leaders. You find leaders not being accountable to their people. So I think our people also need to be told that they can get the money and go ahead to vote the people they are supposed to vote, so that they get the services which they get, which the constitution tells them that says that they should get. Then you when you're debating, you debate as if the government in power has been the worst government ever. I don't think you are right, because if we were the worst government, then we wouldn't be having over 100 opposition members of parliament. We wouldn't be having local councillors who are from the opposition parties. We wouldn't be having people who are from the opposition who are appointed to the cabinet, and they execute their duties perfectly well without any disturb, without saying that you're from FDC and you shouldn't hold this position. You are aware that recently the president appointed someone from FDC who was holding a high position in the FDC. She's now a minister. So there are some things which we should be honest about, which we have seen happen and which are very good for the democracy of this country, and which we can go and argue in front of the world, and they accept that there is surely democracy in Uganda. I thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Evidence. And I'm now going to change this conversation and tweak it towards some questions that have come up, which suggest that this democracy that we are discussing, if maybe I may remind you, we are discussing democracy today because the 15th of September was gazetted by the United Nations as the International Day of Democracy. And so we are using this opportunity to assess the status of democracy in our countries and in the world. So we should not get stuck in our political differences, but help our viewers to understand democracy, and also help ourselves to do an assessment of where we are standing as a country. Now, one of the questions that have come through are suggestions that democracy is a foreign thing, that possibly we are grappling with democracy because it was not meant for us after all. It did not emerge organically within our space as a people, and therefore maybe we need to discard it and come up with a better system. And so I'm going to ask Annah and Marion to speak to this as advocates of democracy. And I also ask you, Sam, to speak to this question, because one of the values for your party, among the four that I've had your leadership talk about, is democracy. So was this well thought for you as a party? And if so, why then do we keep hearing people speaking for your party and the government, sometimes condemning democracy as a foreign thing? So I would love to hear from all of you, and I'll start with Annah.
Thank you so much, Abubaker. Democracy, which is supposed to be about power and civic responsibility, about majority rule and individual rights, about checks and balances and separation of power. I don't think we are tying ourselves on the idea of democracy. We really need it. If I'm to revisit my history and SST classes, even before colonialism, we were organized. We had kingdoms, we had chiefdoms. Just that sometimes if people opposed, they got themselves into danger. Just like how if you oppose the government in Uganda, you're in danger already. Anytime a drone can pick you. But we need democracy. We need civic education up to the grassroots level to make people understand why we need it, to make people understand why it is important to vote leaders of value, not just money. We need to make people believe that the power is within their hands, that the power is for them to make decisions and make important decisions. First of all, to do this, we need information. Fortunately, currently, it's not easy to mobilize and go and educate people. We only think about democracy when it's towards elections. That's when, people are going to campaign. That's when even the Electoral Commission is there trying to teach people on their responsibilities. But we actually need to take it serious and give people the information. We know that things can actually change, though it takes everyone's engagement. So democracy is not something we can just do away with. We need it. And I just pray and hope that, I believe that one day, one time, Uganda will be a free country with all freedoms accepted, with no corruption. It will be a corruption-free country. I believe that one day that will happen, even if it means in 100 years.
Ashaba,
So, yeah,
when you say that
democracy is important.
So when you say that you believe that one day Uganda will be democratic and corruption-free, you make it seem like corruption is a destination, that it's a definite outcome. We shall wake up one day and all is good. Has that happened anywhere? I was thinking, as Marion said earlier, that maybe it's a process. And if so, who are the people who are going to make this happen? Why are you very hopeful? Some of us are not as
it's the people, the community that will make this happen. And it can only happen if we take our civic responsibilities seriously, if we engage with the masses, if we do. How do we translate what we've been doing in this meeting to the meetings and going for conferences and only discussing democracy, this democracy, that government, this government, that? No, that won't bring us the change we need. It is the power of the people, the common people, that woman in Nakasero market, that person in his garden back at home. They all need information on how to exercise their rights to get good leaders. And it's always when people trust you with power. When Museveni came, he looked like a savior. I remember when I used to argue with my late dad that, I don't believe in this government. He would say, my young dad, you don't know anything. We've been through the worst regime. So he came as a savior, and he partly did well from the start, but then he started changing. He didn't change, actually. He started showing his true colors. And all the systems are down. We are just living by the grace of God. But I believe that one day, one time, we shall get some other savior, and this time round it will be an intentional person, intentional to make things better with the help of the people.
Wow, thank you very much, Ashaba. Looking forward to a savior. I don't know what Marion will speak to that, but over to you, Marion, rather. Is democracy a foreign concept? Are we trying to force something on people who cannot appreciate it and for whom it was not made? And I would also ask that you make a comment on Ashaba's hope for a
Can you hear me?
savior. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, so in my opinion, no, it is not a foreign thing. Perhaps the question should be, what type of democracy is foreign? So it's a yes and no question for me, because if you look at pre-colonial African, then we should define what democracy is, because it's the rule, in simple terms, a rule by the people, right? So a system basically where people elect their leaders and people have representatives who represent them and represent their views. Did we have a semblance of that in the African culture before colonial times? I would say yes, because for example, in societies whereby there were societies where there were clan leaders, people who were supposed to represent different communities and also represent the views of those different communities. They would sit down in an elders council, discuss the problems of their communities, and actually vote on what decision they should take. To me, that is a democracy. It's a semblance of a parliament of sorts. For example, also in Uganda, we had the Luchiko. I mean, that is a parliament. It is the equivalent of having, the constitutional monarchy in the UK, whereby, yes, you have the Kabaka or the king, but, certain things are handled by the Luchiko. When it comes to certain things, the Luchiko makes decisions, and it's very And it is very strong, and it decides the direction for how the community proceeds. So to me, that is a democracy in itself. So I would say that different societies in pre-colonial Africa were democratic in a sense. Perhaps the question should be, what type of democracy did the white man introduce? And the type of system that he introduced, did he even introduce a democracy? That should be the first question, because who did the system that he introduced benefit? I mean, for example, in Uganda or in most, British colonies, what was the nature of governance? What was the nature of leadership? Who had the power? It was the white man who had the power, and to keep this power, he would use the police. He would police people. He would use military machinery that he had. He would use divide and rule, one ethnic group against each other. He completely, distorted the African systems of governance and democracy, is what I would say. And even when you see in his power structure, at least at the helm, it is only towards independence that he started to allow Africans into this system. But even on the day of independence, the structure was such in a way that the African was not truly, politically in charge of his country, of his community. That the white man ensured that he was still in force, because the African inherited a system that I would say for DRC Congo, for example, they had to. The colonial government was still negotiating, telling them that, you see, you people do not know how these systems are run. And surely they did not, because it was a foreign system that they had inherited. Let us remain with our commissioners here, our white commissioners, to help guide you through the system, And for most African countries, the system, they inherited a system that they did not know how to operate, because it was never meant, the system was never meant to help them as a community to prosper. It was meant to help another race, another political class to prosper. It was always constantly meant to make sure that the African is subjugated, that the African rules his country, but rules it in such a way that it is meant to be, that another group is meant to be able to exploit it. I don't know if you're getting me.
All right,
Matanda.
Yeah,
You're
thank
getting
you.
me.
Yeah, thank you very much. You have given us a very serious historical account. Yeah, so maybe
yes.
you can conclude on that.
Yes. So what the question should be with, and this goes throughout, it's not only political, it is in our education system, and also the way we perceive ourselves as Africans in general. How much decolonization should we be doing for our democracy? How much of our democratic system is actually not democratic, but a colonial aspect meant to make this country viable for exploitation? I don't know. So we need to interrogate, how much decolonization of our democracy should we be doing? How much decolonization of our education system should we be doing? Should the local government be organized in a way that it's organized? Is it effective? Is the government, the systems, are they effective? How should the parliament, should we even have a parliament? Should we have something different? Would that still qualify it to be a democracy? Should it be executive, legislature, and judiciary? Shouldn't we redefine what democracy means to us? How effectively can the people interrogate with the power? With power to make sure that we have, because at the end of the day, it should be a system by the people. So are the people comfortable with having legislature, executive, and judiciary? Is there another thing that they can put in place that they are more comfortable interacting with? You get me? So that's a conversation. Yeah, that's a conversation I think we should have. Not that democracy necessarily, the concept, the ideology of democracy is not foreign. How it is structured, it was already there. The idea of democracy was already in African countries. The question is the structure. How then does it manifest itself into being is what I think should be interrogated. The other thing.
Yes.
The other thing is maybe, do we have hope? It takes a deliberate effort. Are we, like for example, I said the decolonial aspect. Can we take a deliberate action as the Wananchi and also as people who aspire for a better Africa and a better Uganda, to be deliberate in, first of all, decolonizing these foreign systems that we have inherited that are not supposed to work for us, but are supposed to make us a vessel for exploitation? How courageous are we? How brave are we in taking those steps? How can we create that solidarity and say that, you know what, irrespective of what the international community is going to do to us, I think it is high time that we sit down as Africans and liberate our systems, and figure out for ourselves what works for us. Now, creating that solidarity, because I don't think Uganda's problem is not a Ugandan problem necessarily. It is an African problem. For you to interrogate the issues of democracy and politics on this country, on this continent, it comes from colonialism, manifests itself in different ways in different countries. But what is consistent is dictatorship, militarization, violent elections, despots that do not want to leave the seat of power. In most African countries, these are the things that you will see manifest. So to look, for me, in interrogating this problem, I have to look at the bigger question of Africa and how do we get ourselves out of the pit that colonization put us in. Yeah, but so can that happen? Maybe it is upon us, the new generation. I think the Nelson Mandelas did their part of giving us a pseudo-political autonomy, but the young generation that is now should, first of all, equip themselves with knowledge about what the real problem is. It is not okay to just say Museveni go and what. Yes, he's a dictator and he has done but so have other political leaders on the continent. So it's not only a Museveni problem, it is an African problem. So how do a young person in this space organize myself and my fellow African aspiring leaders or wananchi, even the citizen, to make sure that I find a solution to this particular problem.
Thank you very much.
That organizing takes time. It takes time, right?
Yeah.
But can I answer some of the questions that the RDC raised?
Yeah, in a minute.
There's some things that he addressed to me.
Yeah, in a minute. Yes.
Yeah. So he talked about that opposition should be trained to oppose. That is a very wrong thing to say. I mean, you cannot oppress me, torture me, and do all sorts of atrocities upon my person, and then you have the audacity to decide how I oppose you, how I fight against that oppression. That is entirely wrong. It's an entirely wrong mentality. So that does it mean that, okay, oppressors also got to be taught how to oppress? It's illogical in itself. So I, as a wananchi, because you're oppressing me, will have to innovate ways to fight back against your system of oppression. You don't have to like it. It is what works for me. It is the little power, at least the little power I'm remaining with, is to decide how I attack your system, how I fight back against your oppression. He talked about the fact that the government, so why are we still electing, why are members of parliament, of the NRM still being elected and all that? Well, I had already mentioned what happens in this election, the kind of intimidation. I've answered why we cannot say that voters in Uganda make independent decisions because of the environments that they operate in. I mean, the level of poverty, a poor man is thinking about his stomach at that moment. He cannot make an independent decision. But he's poor, but he's living under this sort of intimidation and oppression. So we can't say that most of these leaders are actually voted in good faith. But then the most important thing is that we have to see that the fact that the state also has the machinery and particularly the money to be able to support all these candidates, which the opposition does not have. And the state is constantly making new constituencies every electoral year. Covering this country has, I think now they have reached, I don't know how many districts we now have. I don't know if that, but I think they're in the hundreds now. So it's hard for the opposition to keep up and keep confronting candidates. That's why you see that in some districts, there are candidates who are unopposed because the opposition does not have the capacity compared to the state, which has resources in its hands to compete. Yeah, I'm done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marion. And I think Sam, now you can engage. The question I asked is, we have tried to take the conversation higher than our petty differences internally here to ask whether this system called democracy can work for us and whether it's made for us. And your party claims to have it as one of its core values. And Marion is telling us that the system itself is okay, but the way it is structured here is problematic. So we would love to hear your views on this question.
Thank you so much. Maybe there's something I would start with. Ashaba frequently mentions Museveni as if he's mentioning like a brother or something. I would wonder, why do you lose when you say President Museveni? The Constitution of Uganda describes him as a fountain of honor. So please, when you can say President Museveni, if all is, that's what I wanted to say. So kindly, please take note of that. Then you have said that the NRM considers democracy as one of its principles, but some people frequently condemn it, calling it a foreign kind of thing. Now, some people, when they are debating or when they are speaking, they do it as individuals. We cannot say that all the time when the people, if I'm in the government, does not mean that all the time when I'm speaking, my ideas are the ideas of all the people in the government. Sometimes people speak according to what is in their minds at that particular point of time.
Sam, sorry to intervene a bit, but I'm wondering, does that logic also apply to those in opposition who insult the president? Because earlier on you said that opposition insults the president, but not everyone in opposition insults the president. So where is the place for that?
I agree. They know how they should oppose. But there are those who want to hide in the government and want to do personal wars. Like someone goes on radio, on social media, on internet to fight personal wars. And unfortunately, do you know why we want to relate those ones with the opposition? Because when they are attached and when we want the law to take its course, now you hear the opposition wanting to come up and protect and defend. So when you come up to try to protect and defend that, it means you know what that person was doing and you agree with it, and that's how you would want things to go. So that's what happens most oftentimes. Then some people in the NRM could not even be aware of the principles of the party of which they belong to. But the truth is, democracy is part of our principles, and we believe in it, and we've led Uganda in a democratic way. However much there could be issues which could be debatable, and which issues you're coming up with, and which I know that as time goes on, they will be better. However much the democracy is falling, but I think not every idea that comes from the foreigners are always bad. There are those which are good for our people, and when we look through them, we buy them and we apply them, and for as long as they are good for our people, then that is good. Then maybe. Abubaker, I don't think that opposing the government should be a war. You know, the way people speak and the way I'm listening to their views, it's as if opposing the government or being on the opposite side of the government is a war. No. In normal circumstances, opposing, you should be like an advisor. If something is bad for you, you bring another idea that you think can be better. Because in any case, you all belong to one country and you would want to see it better. But unfortunately, most times want to take opposition as if it is a war, as if it is a battlefield. Like, if I'm opposing, I should never say anything positive about the government. And sometimes I laugh when I go on radio with them. You find something is better, but someone the way is good, people are appreciating it, they are calling it, giving it credit, but someone wants to make it evil. That is not how things should be. If something is good, go in the public and say this program is good, and we appreciate. We cannot always oppose everything. That's not how we should do things.
Sam, a question for you on that point, and it is two-way. On one hand, you're saying opposing should not be a war. What then do you say to the response of the state, where it kills, it harasses those who have alternative views? You have seen, I don't think I have to list for you the number of times people who have alternative views are harassed and arrested, and you know, sometimes unfortunately even end up losing people. Don't you think it is that approach by the state that then makes those in opposition to become militant and in some way also you know, treating it as a war, as you're suggesting? Secondly, you say that opposition sometimes should appreciate good government programs. I have also been waiting for you to mention anything good about opposition from the beginning of this show, and you have not. And so maybe it's a wrong thing for me to expect you to praise opposition, and therefore also an unrealistic thing to expect opposition to praise government. Doesn't everyone have their roles cut out in this conversation?
Abubaker, I think I have, maybe if I might have not been direct, but I said about something to do with people from the opposition who have been appointed to the government position and have taken them up, and they are serving Ugandans. Honestly, that one I applaud them and I appreciate them because
you did, and so appreciating would mean joining.
No, not joining. Now, the questions you've brought me, the questions you've given me now brings to the point that I wanted to tell you the question of oppression. I think that's why you bring the idea of people being harassed, people dying. This usually happens when people want to force their way. You know, some people, because they have disagreed with something and they would want it to fall, or because they have disagreed with the government and they would want to see it crumbling, sometimes they want to go the violent way. They want to force their way, to force things to happen. And that's why you find people wanting to demonstrate, others wanting to destroy property, others want a lot of things. So when they are doing that, it's when the government brings in some power. And you understand that the government has an arm of force. It has the military and all that. So if people do it in a peaceful manner and they say, we want democracy, but we want to go a peaceful way, nobody will be touched. Nobody will suffer anything. But because some people want to force their way, that's how oppression.
Sam, I'm sorry to keep interrupting you, but I really want this conversation to go well, and I'm going to bring in Ashaba, who also has a comment. But I want to ask, I have seen leaders of opposition who are stormed and pulled, by the way, by RDCs out of radio stations. How violent is it for someone to share views on a radio station? But I think before you joined, a moment, somehow before you joined, Marion told us of an event of less than 20 women at Makerere University that was clamped down a few days ago. How violent was that? Yes, there was an event at Makerere University a few days ago. Sorry?
What were they doing? What happened?
Yes, okay. Marion is going to give us another brief on that, but it was a meeting convened by the Vice Guild President of Makerere University for women empowerment and breaking barriers. And so they got clearance from the Minister of Health, and they were guided to follow the SOPs and to have less than 20 people on site and the rest of the people online. It was clamped down. And yet you also mentioned demonstration as one of the ways of people forcing their way. Demonstrating is a constitutional thing in this country. Demonstrating is one of the ways people express themselves. It's not illegal, it's not criminal. But let's also hear from Ashaba, and then you can answer at a go.
Bakar, please, let me first finalize this, because when you bring out that and I don't answer it, it will go like
fine. Okay, fine.
You are aware that demonstrating, yes, is a constitutional right, but demonstrating, as you demonstrate, you should be aware of other people's rights. You cannot be violent and cause people's property to be destroyed, and then you say it is your right to demonstrate. As you demonstrate, you must keep in mind that other people also have the right. And also you are aware about a law which is an act of parliament, that as you when you want to carry out a demonstration, you're supposed to communicate to the DPC, and the DPC also communicates to the RDC, and all those people. So when you don't pass through all those, of course, the RDC will have no choice but to order for the arrest, or to say that, or to stop the meeting. So I don't know if those women was it Makerere? I don't know if they followed the right procedure for that meeting. Then Abubakar, as you oppose and as you demonstrate and as people do all those things, they should be aware that there are some people who embrace the kind of government that they are opposing, and those people's rights also are supposed to be protected. Because this is the democracy which we decided to subscribe to. We said if the majority wins, then the person will take over. So unfortunately, sometimes we want to go a democratic way. Then after that, when we realize that this is not going to favor us, then we say, no. Let us go in some other way. So I think that's not being fair. Then I also said there is something that Marion, I think it is Marion who has said it. I told you, Marion, you're saying that there is no freedom for any opposition person. That whenever we come across the opposition person, we want to harass them, we don't allow them to do anything they want to do. I remember asking you that if we do all that, if we don't allow those people to have their freedoms, to campaign freely, to nominate themselves, to do all that kind of, then how comes we have over 100 members of parliament who are from the opposition parties? How did those ones win? Did they declare themselves? No, they went into elections, they convinced the voters, and the people voted them, and that's why they're in parliament and executing their duties. Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much. Ashaba, I don't know if you have a specific question for Sam before we are coming towards the end of this conversation. So we are going to have a round of some sort of way forward and parting shots, but possibly you could bring your question or comment.
It's actually a comment. First of all, Sam, I'm sorry for referring to Museveni as Museveni. Let me call him his rightful name, Mr. Tibuhaburwa Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. I don't think he's the legitimate president. That is my opinion and my view. He's someone who has imposed himself on Ugandans. He's forcing life on us, but that is still okay. So back to the question of oppression. I just felt like, demonstrating already when you are saying, that if people go peaceful, then nothing will happen to them. We've ever tried. Remember 2019, the Fees Must Fall protest that was started by Makerere female students? I was part of those 15 girls. We went through the rightful procedures, and the havoc that they were trying to talk to abandon the mission. And the next day we had us and arresting us and charging us with incitement of violence. It was just 15 girls marching later to the president's office. But that was suppressed. The rampant murders of Vijambia. The security forces didn't do anything much. So it was actually a press conference. We go to Masaka and for a press conference at home. And as finished it, police came and surrounded her home and they started threatening her. We don't want to see you around Masaka town. We don't want to see you moving. You're going to cause chaos. It was just a press conference calling on the concerned organs to come and do something about it. But what did we get out of there? You get one minister, Otafile, bragging of how when people were still voting NRM in Masaka, then there was peace, but now that they didn't, he implied something. And you really expect people to stomach all that. Look at he always says oppression happens when people force their way. Did that woman that was shot carrying a plate of food to go and serve a customer in November 2020, was she forcing her way when one of the presidential candidates was arrested? We were doing exams and all we could hear were guns and bullets firing and tear gas. Just because people were demanding for the release of someone, they hadn't spoiled property. But the chaos that ensued, the violence, the brutality. And another case in point, one of the human rights activists, Nana, lost her uterus to the Uganda police when she tried a one-woman protest against police brutality. And police eventually lost the case and they wanted to compensate her. How much money is going to restore someone's uterus? So some of these things are actually so sad. Peaceful demonstrations are a constitutional right, but we unfortunately have a government that always thinks that people are not going to be peaceful. We've ever had a peaceful protest in March 2018, the Women's March, when we were protesting against the murders of women in areas of Wakiso and Entebbe. For the first time, okay, let me give credit where it's due, Mr. Orikunda. You shouldn't think that I criticize the government only, but during that march, police gave us the support we needed. They marched with us. No property was stolen. No one was harmed. We marched and addressed the press, and everything got done. What would have happened if they let just those 15 girls take a letter to the president, deliver it, return back, and go to class? Did we really have to have students beaten and military occupy the university for almost a week? No, I don't think so. So the peace that we preach, we need to really practice it. And as I conclude, I would like to also address the issue of language. I'm glad to know that Mr. Orikunda is also a person of language, but you're saying politeness is the way to go and all that. You have a rude and ruthless dictator in power. And how do you make sure that you get services provided if you don't also go rude, if you don't also touch where it hurts, if you don't also use language that will attract the attention of the government to act? Unfortunately, they don't always act the right way. They only come and oppress individuals. And lastly, you talked about opposition, those people that join government, that the government fishes out of opposition. Those are the people you think are opposition. Joining the government, you cease to become opposition. So I think the real opposition that we still have also deserves some credit. Some of the policies have been adopted by the government from the opposition advice. So I would like to call upon the government to just let people the government should be fair. You cannot stop a conference of a few women and you call police and you say they are breaking rules. Even when they have invited a few people, they have masks, they are going to follow SOPs, but you've already decided that this can't happen. No, that's not fair. So we still need for civic education, mobilization, and putting information out there. I can't go without saying that I was disappointed seeing the First Lady blaming the high rates of teenage pregnancies on poor parenting. Yes, it could be poor parenting, but how about that ministry? Schools are closed, international schools are closed. Anyway, it's just a lot that we can debate about, and the day will end, we get into another day. But we only need fairness, we only need fair treatment, we need rights to be respected. As a human rights activist, nothing gives me joy like seeing the things we advocated for being implemented, like the fees thing. Recently, that policy was suspended for being removed. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Ashaba. Thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kirabo. You have been a wonderful panel. I'm going to allow each one of you a minute now to just give us a parting shot of anything you think is necessary. It could be responding to an issue. It could be bringing out something you think has not come out. It could be sharing a way forward for us as a country. It could be a message as we commemorate the International Day of Independence. And I'm going to start with you, Sam.
You're starting with me?
Yeah, yes, Sam, yes. Have your parting shot.
Thank you so much, moderator. Maybe what I could tell you as we conclude is that as we do activism and as we oppose, we should know that it's not war. We are all Ugandans. This is our country. And today, President Museveni is our president. Tomorrow, there will be someone else. But that will not take us away. We still remain citizens of this country and we ought to love it. When something is done perfectly well, we ought to appreciate. I think we should all struggle to see our country being better, and we do it in a peaceful way, not creating hatred, not creating war with everyone, not insulting everyone. I think that would work. So I thank you so much for inviting me, and have a great day.
Thank you very much, Sam. To you, Marion.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
So mine will be too a reaction to the RDC. Although I feel like I did answer his question about why is it that we have more NRM members of parliament or local council and all that. I did explain the difficulties that it takes the opposition to organize and to get its people out there, things to do with monetary capacity. The militarization also itself suffocates their accessibility to the voter, but also protecting their vote. I did discuss the fact of, every day there's a new constituency being put in place, and therefore keeping track and being able to mobilize as fast as the constituency are being put in place is very hard. A lot of other things, etc., etc. So there's so many things. Just saying the numbers should not make you think you're doing well. It's just a symbol. It's just to show that you have really made it so hard for other people to organize as effectively as you have. So my parting shot will be that I think, like I said, the issue of democracy and politics is not just a one country problem or just a one man. I think even if Museveni was to go today, the next leader will have relatively the same challenges, because, you know, Museveni also inherited a country in shambles, you know, a lot of civil wars around the country, tribal wars, you know, an economy in crisis. So there's so many things. I think we need to give him credit on some aspects, that he went ahead to find, I would say, bandage-like solutions to them, you know, a relativity of making sure these warring fractions come together at the same table, or for some that you could not negotiate with, suffocate, you know, putting the economy up to some certain level, you know, a constitution and a semblance of governance and all that. However, I think along the way he faced the same issues that other African leaders did. You have this system which was meant for exploitation, and this system gives you a lot of power as a president, and so there's always the temptation of misusing that power, because they are not apart from the ones that you have put in place. You have the support of state machinery and the military. So everything is at your whim, your beck and call. If you want people to have a constitution, you just say the word and they'll have a constitution. If you don't want people to have a constitution, you can just simply wish it away, you know. So the system really is rigged, irrespective of who is there. I think, in my opinion, irrespective of who is there and what. So
yeah,
I think as a generation,
yes, Marion,
we
as you
need
conclude.
to look into ourselves. Yes, I think generation, we need to come together and look at what really is the issue, and how do we either do away with some of these systems? Because I'll tell you, in Iceland, they actually did away with the military, and they did away with the military because they had NATO forces as their military. However, there came a time when they noticed that most of the military members were raping women, they were raping their citizens. And they just decided to do away with what? With the military. So as we talk now, Iceland has no, what they have is maybe the police. Yes. So those types of you know, those types of radical decisions to upset the status quo and say, well, this thing is not working for us. Do we necessarily need it? If we do not need it, can we do away with it? And if we need it, can we reform it? So I think that's the conversation that as we look into Museveni must go, as also young people should look into how does the system also go, or how do we modify the system? Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Marion. And Ashaba, your parting shot in about a minute.
Thank you so much for having me here. I can agree with Marion that it will take a deliberate effort to achieve the democracy we want. So I call upon all the leaders, the youth, everyone to be part of the change, to be part of the change starts with you and me. So let's be deliberate in our efforts, and we shall achieve what we really desire. You know, Christians are still waiting for Jesus even after 2,000 years. So who are we not to hope for better in the next, I don't know how many years, but it can be possible. It's possible. Yeah. Thank you. It was a pleasure being on this panel, and have a great day.
Yes, thank you very much, Ashaba. Thank you very much, Sam Orikunda. Thank you, Marion, for sparing more than 2 hours to join the community show to share your views. Ultimately, what we all want, like you have all variously stated, is a better country that works for everyone. And democracy, you also did say, is a process, it's not a destination. It is something we have to keep working on and marching towards. And our motto here at Civic Space TV is freedom always. And so we shall always bring conversations like this with the hope that we can expand the frontiers of freedom in this country. To you who are watching, I want to thank you for expending with time and resources to follow this conversation. And I want to invite you to make your comments in the chat section, to make your comments on Twitter, to make your comments on Facebook, to ask questions and make suggestions on how we can make this better. Till we meet in the 10th episode of the community show, all the best for God and my country. Have a good afternoon.